And I'm sure Niners fans are just banging their hand on the glass here or on the table, wanting Julio and the fact that it's Julio Jones and he's available for a trade. And it seems like Niners fans just anytime a player who's good is available for trade, they want him. And especially for a position that is, I would say, more of a need than most people think. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that because, I mean, like in theory, right? Debo and Brandon Ayuk is this very, very exciting young receiver duo, but both have had a little bit of injury issues. Or Brandon Ayuk had three different injuries over the course of 2019, 2020. When you start with his core injury over the draft, then his pulled hamstring in camp, and then his ankle injury to end the season. Debo Samuel has had a history of hamstring problems, excuse me, not to mention the Jones fracture he had before the season. So, like, if both of those guys get injured, the depth behind them is a little scary. There's a lot of guys that could be something, but there's no reliable guy. So I would say that third guy is a decent need.
And too, just like, even if one of them goes down, you have one of them who's good, like really good, obviously, but like you need more than just one good receiver and Kittle to actually run an efficient offense. So it is a bigger need because right now the depth chart just going to mention Debo Samuel, Ayuk, and then it's something like Richie James, Trent Sherfield, Jalen Hurd, Travis Benjamin, Muhammad Sanu,
Kevin White,
River Craycraft, Benny Fowler, and just more like camp body names. So there's obviously a lot of guys there, but only two of those would you feel really confident in playing a significant amount of snaps, I'd say.
Yeah. And so now let's talk about Julio, right? We've established that the Niners have a need for a third receiver. Now, that receiver doesn't have to be Julio Jones, but if it was Julio Jones, that'd be incredible, right? We're talking about a future Hall of Famer and still one of the, like, Julio Jones would automatically be the best receiver on this team. I know a lot of people love Ayuk. I love Debo. But come on, this is one of the greatest receivers in NFL history. Yeah. Should they trade for him?
I think the Niners would be better off trading for like just some random like average receiver as opposed to
I'll give you a name right now. The Jets drafted Elijah Moore. The Niners have a need at slot receiver. What about Jamison Crowder?
Yeah, I mean, I just think value-wise, Crowder would probably be better in the sense that, well, keeping on Julio, like a team like the Niners who's more run-heavy, do they need that number one elite receiver? Well, I mean, the Falcons had it when they had Shanahan, when they had Julio, but around him, they didn't really have too many good receivers. They had Sanu, who was all right, but it was mainly predicated on the fact that Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman could just run down people's throats and be so effective at that. So I would say that the Niners would not be needing Julio. I think we can agree they need a third guy, maybe even a fourth guy, you could argue, but trading for Julio and then being a run-first team and having three really good receivers, one of them being just elite, is almost overkill. And then here's the other angle too. Cap space-wise, Bosa and then Kendricks are going to be paid a lot, and I do not foresee them letting
Warner.
Yeah, I do not foresee either of those guys leaving. They're crucial parts of the defense, and I'd say they'll be more valuable to the team than getting a guy like Julio. And then the other part of that is just, would you rather have a star receiver or just like a really good middle linebacker or D end? Because I would probably have the D end in this case. So yeah,
right.
I would say no, but I honestly don't think there's really any reason to. And then the other thing I forgot was the picks. They are lacking picks because of the trade ups. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so you kind of outlined on each one of the points, and I do want to elaborate them more. So, like the money problem you talked about, right? If they get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo, money's not a problem for 2021. Here's where money becomes a problem. In 2022, Eric Armstead's cap hit goes above $20 million. Fred Warner will be out of his rookie deal by 2022. I guarantee you Fred Warner's not going to have a backloaded deal. Why? Because he's one of the best players in his position. He's been a Pro Bowler. He's been an All-Pro, and he's about to get paid. He's about to be the highest paid linebacker in the NFL at a time where the linebacker market is about to tip because Darius Leonard is going to be paid. Devin White has one more year before they will take his fifth-year option and touch his contracts. But there's a few more people. Roquan Smith, Tremaine Edmonds. There's a few guys here that are going to get money right here in this offseason or the next one. So the linebacker market is going to be reset right here, and Fred Warner might be the person to do it. So that'll be a high cap hit. George Kittle's cap hit is going to be high. Trent Williams' cap hit, which is very low this year, will increase. And when you add a 32-year-old Julio Jones, right, you start off with money, and it's a little bit of a problem. Okay, Parag can adjust the money, but here's the thing. You touched on it. This is going to be a run-first offense. They just paid a fullback a hell of a lot of money. Not this year, but they give him a long-term contract, which means that in an ideal world, this wants to be a 21 personnel offense. Well, if you want to be a 21 personnel run-first offense, how many mouths are you going to feed? You want to get Ayuk the ball. You drafted him high. You want to get Debo the ball. You drafted him high. George Kittle's the best player on this team. You want to get him the ball. And then you throw in Julio Jones, who, if you're not throwing him the ball 6, 7, 8 times a game, then what are you doing? This is one of the best players in the NFL. So when you go through all of that and the fact that the Niners aren't built to be a drop-back pass team, so having 3 elite receivers is really not useful, because even with Trey Lance, and I know everybody's high on Trey Lance, and I'm also high on Trey Lance. I'm so excited he's the quarterback, even though I wasn't high on him before the draft. You know, it's crazy how fandom kind of warps your mind, where as soon as they draft him, you're just like the most excited person in the world about him. He's not built to be a drop-back quarterback, at least this current year. Jimmy Garoppolo is certainly not a dropping back 35, 40 times type quarterback. So from that standpoint, let's say it takes a second and a third to get Julio Jones. Like, yeah, that's awesome. Like, you have Julio Jones with Kyle Shanahan again. Like, imagine how great that would be. But they don't need to give up more picks like that. You can give up a 6th and get Jamison Crowder, who might be cut by the end of training camp because Elijah Moore is rocking for the Jets, and they don't need Jamison Crowder. And Jamison Crowder, wow, he's nowhere near Julio Jones. He'll never be what Julio Jones is. He might be the perfect balance number 3 that catches 30, 35 balls a game in the season from Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo.
Receiver 3 if he caught 30 passes in a game.
Right. He would be incredible, right? Yeah. And he would be able to kind of, just move the chains. You only really need him for 3rd and 6, 3rd and 5, because ideally the Shanahans don't want to get into 3rd down. And when you do get into 3rd down, they want to be in 3rd and manageable. And that's when they really go into 11 personnel. So I think that, like, in an ideal world, like, it's hard to say don't trade for a Hall of Famer, because that's who Julio Jones is. But I just don't see the logical thought process flow for the 49ers, especially where they've allocated their resources and they made it so clear they really want to run the football next year and they want to do it at a high level. I mean, the Aaron Banks pick highlights that. The Jalen Moore pick highlights that. Going and picking Trey Sermon highlights that. They want to run the football next year and they want to throw it only off play action. Yeah, Julio Jones is a hell of a receiver off play action too, but it's like, if you want to run the ball and you already got 2 good receivers, especially 2 incredible receivers that are going to be a part of your run game, I just think you need a 3rd guy. And I think Sterling Shepard's another Jamison Crowder type that you could throw in that conversation. But yeah, it's just a long way of saying Julio Jones, incredible player. Just don't think it makes sense for the 49ers.
He doesn't fit the timeline. And 2, one position group that we didn't even mention is the whole secondary is pretty much on 1-year deals. If Verrett balls out this year, he's going to get a big contract. Ward, Tart, any of the other corners, if any of those guys play extraordinarily well, and obviously you want them to play well, you don't want them to be bad, but if one of them or 2 of them play really well, they're going to get a big contract, and that'll also just cut into the cap further and further. So it doesn't make sense for their timeline, and cutting Jimmy G, whether they actually do that or not is kind of to be seen at this point. But you would really think that it just I don't know. It doesn't look like they will at this point, but it just, money doesn't add up.
That's actually a great point too, because right, you got 3 guys that are signed only through this year in Verrett, K'Wan Williams, and Tart. And then you go to the 2022 where you have Emmanuel Mosley and Jimmy Ward signed through that. Well, what happens if the Niners are kind of like a 12-5 team? They're right on the precipice. Trey Lance balls out as a rookie and they don't get there, At that point, they would want that money, if Verrett was an important part of that defense, which if he plays, he would be. Same thing with Tart, same thing with K'Wan Williams. All 3, the only question is health, because all 3 are incredible football players when they play. Well, if you're in that situation, right, you would want to run it back, right? Like Trey Lance, 1 year extra. You were just 12-5. You were this incredible football team.
Yeah.
Well, if you have Julio Jones's contract added in there, you might lose one of those guys, you know? So that's where if the money, like it makes sense for 2021. It's easy. It becomes a little more complicated in 2022. I think that's actually a really, really good point. I think that needs to be talked about more because like Jason Verrett, if he plays the exact same way he played as last year, that's a
They get a
top
lot
10
of money.
corner in football. So you want to pay him. You want a top 10 corner. It's a premium position. It's a more premium position than receiver. So I think that's another really good point. Yeah.
Mhm.
But I think long story short, we're both kind of in the same spot here.